Uh, uh. Welcome to the Jurassic Park, which consists of so many dinosaur debater in this room. And I know, ladies and gentlemen, I know we sacrificed the many game debaters because of your shorter period of the debating career. You lost us. And maybe you could try your best more in order to win the dinosaur. But ultimately, whether you can win or not is very up to the uncontrollable factor, right? Because even if you try your best, maybe sometimes we will do more, right? That time your happiness is based on the uncontrollable factor. But on our side of the house, you can create the idealistic world, the debating society without the dinosaur debater, and you can win the tournament like us, right? So I said, welcome to the Jurassic Park. But now, on a proposition bench, let me say, welcome to the very idealistic cyber world designated to your happiness. And that's the reason why government bench will take the debate. I want to talk about three things in my speech. First of all, let me set up in this debate, because we think setting up clearly in this debate is very important. Secondly, I want to talk about how uncontrollable in this world and your happiness will totally confined. Secondly, I want to talk about why this pleasure on our side of the house is essentially the same thing, the happiness in the physical world, and that is totally okay. So move on to the setup, right? On our side of the house, this technology allows us to design the idealistic world both before and after you enter the society. So before you plug that machine to your brain, that you can design the alternative utopia, alternative universe as you want. And if you get sick and tired of that world, you can create the next alternative universe for an infinite amount of time, right? You can design, and also you can design whether you hold that past memory of the previous world, and if you want to keep that memory to the next universe, it is also possible. But if you do not want to do that and want to forget about that, it is also okay. And also, before you take that technology, of course, we will conduct a very deep consulting and get the clear, sure agreement of them, because of course we recognize this machine is very irreversible choices, and we will conduct a very check for that kind of things, right? And also clarify what we have to debate in this particular motion, right? Because firstly, I want to exclude the case of the malfunctioning of this technology, because we are happy to assume that technology is perfect and malfunctioning will not happen, because whether this technology might break broken down is perfectly up to a intangible possibility, and we can debate based on that kind of the very unforeseeable things. It doesn't make any sense. But secondly, notice that this motion explicitly requires us to talk about average person, and this average person means not in Japan but global level. I think that Japan is relatively developed states, so I think the relatively developing states like the Thailand, people mediocre in Thailand or think this kind of country is the things we want to talk about. And lastly, and most importantly, this is as non-individual debate, right? So I think no matter, even if they talk about the society's problem, things like that, that doesn't matter, right? What we want to talk about, whether this individual is happiness or not. With your foot on that basis, let's move on to the substantive. But before that, go.
How do you test for coercion and desperation if these people are living in developing countries that are have desperate conditions? But are you going to exclude them?
Even if okay. Move on. Okay, even if these kind of coercion or things like that happen, still it's better for these people. I will talk about in my speech. So moving to the first argumentation about uncontrollability, right? Because we think in this physical world that there is a very uncontrollable factor exists. I want to split it into the two parts. Firstly, individual level, right? For example, appearances you have, academic talent you have, on preferences you have, it's sometimes decided by the morally arbitrary factor. And of course, we consider you can try and make some effort, but ultimately, whether you can be a very idealistic situation is totally impossible. For example, maybe I can make a cosmetic surgery, but being the ectotoma or this kind of thing is very, very important, right? We think do that. Many people fail to maximize their happiness. What do I mean by that? For example, I love this Suo Sango, but I want to marry her. But problem is, she is virtual existence, and insofar as I have a physical body, it is impossible to marry with Suo Sango and maximize our happiness. For example, academic talent is basically decided by genetical factor or things like that. Of course, you can study hard, but anyway, limitation exists. We don't think that all people can enroll to the University of Tokyo if they study hard or things like that, right? So as I already said, we concede you can try your best, but at the end of the day, ultimately, whether you can success or you can be happy or totally depend on the uncontrollable factor. But second point is a social problem, right? Because society more or less require you to do something very undesirable. For example, working, right? Society society requires you working, but given that these people is a very average level or in this country, we think that's problematic. Because, for example, I want to play Splatoon 3 for a very long time without working but society requires to work in order to live in Tokyo, in order to spend some kind of things, buy some commodity. Or some people want to sleep for a long time, but still you have to also have to work, and this kind of the happiness from the sleeping is totally prevented by the existence of the uncontrollable things. For example, marriages, right? Many people personally don't agree with the marriage, but the people surrounding you sometimes pressurize and coerce to marry, or you are both in cooperation, sometimes ask when will you marry, or things like that. That kind of peer pressure also confine your happiness. And at the end of the day, many uncontrollable factors confine your ability to maximize and pursue the happiness to the fullest extent. But of course, that is problematic. But outside of the house, of course, it is easy to change that situation. If you have a desire, that a desirable situation, preferable world can be created, and you can live as you want. Literally, I can marry with the Suo Sango. I can be a Ikuta Toma, and that will massively increase my happiness, self-esteem, things like that. And the point is, let's move on to the second argumentation. Why displeasure is essentially the same thing with the physical world, right? What I want to emphasize is that purpose of your life is basically being happy, and happiness is not some kind of physical input or some magical things, but happiness is a neural system and brain stimulus, right? What we are doing on the outside of the house, this technology directly manipulates this neural system or brain stimulus, right? So I think that what we are doing is that directly make you feel happy, right? But outside, why this argument is very important? Because the opposition side might talk about outside of the house also people can be happy, even if they take that argument at their best. Still outside it's very good, because they under the outside of the house, of course people have to do something and unnecessary things in order to be happy. But outside of the house, directly be happy by utilizing this system. So if we think that their best case is partly besides us, for that reason we are very happy to take championship.
Thank you. We, the opposition side, believe in it's better for individual to live in the real world where you can feel happiness, you can get happiness physically. Because we believe that there is a clear difference between pleasure and happiness. Let me explain. So pleasure, under their paradigm, like individual will use these experience machines, and they can feel pleasure, as I told you. But the pleasure is just a chemical reaction in your mind, right? In your brain. We think that is just the superficial, and it's kind of a pleasure is having adrenaline in your brain. So what is the happiness? Judges. So we think that happiness is in exclusive benefit in the real world. So happiness is mainly the fulfillment of your process. Happiness is only possible when there is ups and downs, when there is pleasure and unpleasure. So I will expand further with this point in my constructive. So because for example, let's take up the debate. So because they believe in that we are dinosaurs and they want to crack down us. But however, we think in their paradigm, debaters maybe will continue to win their round, because that is the pleasure that they want to achieve. But we think it's good for the debaters to fail, and it's the beauty of the experience. So because that could be the very incentive for you to be better and for you to make you stronger. So we're very proud to oppose. So I will explain two things. Firstly, let me visualize the experience machine and what is the problem with that, and secondly, what is the exclusive benefit of living in the real world. But before that, let me rebut to the prime minister. So main case from the prime minister was like this. So in the real world, there is you cannot control everything, right? And the work is hard, or like marriage is hard, or so forth. So we think, yes, we concede that the problem of the living in the real world, but we think that is exactly why we have to, like, it's better for us to live in the real world. We think because of there is ups and downs, and we believe it is worth living for you. And moreover, we have to say they couldn't explain the choice mechanism under their paradigm. We assume because experience machine is so appealing to people, we think many people will be likely to rush into that choices, even though that is irreversible, as motion stated, right? We think that is very problematic, because let's take an example of a person who are very desperate due to like being unemployed in Japan, for example. These people will rush into that choices, and we think that is bad, because that is experiencing machine is actually kind of drugs, because it's kind of you can feel pleasure by taking like illegal drug or so forth, but you are addicted to that, and we think that is kind of a committing suicide, and that is the same with committing suicide. So that is bad choices. So let me talk about the problem of experience machine. Yes, I take it.
Smartphone is also very appealing. The people rush to use the smartphone. Will you ban a smartphone on your side?
No. So because it's totally different, right? Because under their paradigm, people will be plugged in, and that you cannot run away from it. So what is the problem? So we think the problem of their side of a house is that the desirable experience or pleasurable experience, yes, you can achieve like within your mind, but it's totally depend on your capacity to imagine, right? So because that is a clear limitation of imagination in our brain. So we think you yourself do not know what is happiness for you yet. Judges, we think that is the very important things, because unless you experience it, you cannot know what is the happiness for you. For example, we are talking about the debate. So you maybe under their paradigm, debaters will be continue to win and win and win in every round, because that is the desire, like pleasurable thing that they want to achieve. But we think unexpected losses of debate are very beautiful, and that they're very precious experience for you. Or for example, because there is like random people meeting in the physical real world, like this tournament, we think there is a chances for you to get like your boyfriend or girlfriend, or like you can, because you felt so like worth rate due to the loss of debate, you can get the incentive to improve yourself. We think this mechanism of like ups and downs and improvement is a crucial benefit of outside of house. However, under their paradigm, because people will be totally rely on their imagination, and they cannot like change themselves under their paradigm, we think that is clear harm of their side. No, thank you. So let me move on. So more about the happiness issue. So as I told you, like feeling pleasure in your brain and the happiness is totally different. What is that? So I have two levels of analysis here. So let me analyze the happiness. So happiness is created step by step. So happiness doesn't happen just like one time or one second, right? Because like for example, when you like continue to debate rounds, and you feel the most happiness or satisfied when you achieved that champion or winning after the loss, right? These kind of ups and downs is very beneficial, and step by step happiness is crucially is a crucial benefit of the side of our side of house. And second analysis here, happiness is created by delta. So we think you need to feel sometimes disappointed. You need to feel desperate in order to feel happiness truly, because the delta like crystallize you that like happiness don't happen every time. You need to feel disappointed and desperate in order for you to feel the happiness that they like want to feel every time. So which means because happiness is created in the real world physically, we're very proud to oppose.
Let's talk about happiness. What is happiness? I think there are two layers to happiness. One is that negative things do not happen to you, so there is no minus. And then there is the plus. The good things happen to you. You are entertained. You feel the pleasure. You feel love. You feel happy, right? So we need to break these two things down. But in each of these cases, I think 100% of the case, once you plug in, we ensure you that you are happier on our side. So let me do my argument by replying to what the LO brought in one by one. Okay, firstly, the LO talked about, okay, happiness and pleasure is a different thing. Okay, so pleasure is one factor that constitute happiness. Yes, there are other things like self-fulfillment, there are confidence, love, sometimes a little bit of thrill, other beautiful things in life that constitute happiness, but that's okay because we can also create those things under our side. And also, secondly, the LO also said pleasure is given by adrenaline, like it's the chemical in your mind, but as the biological organisms that we are, happiness is also a chemical thing. It's also the electric signals that your brain experiences. The world you perceive is made up of by the electrical signals and the chemicals like endorphin or adrenaline or all those happiness, love type of hormones in your mind. So that is fine. What if, and also secondly, she talked about it is irreversible. So what, right? There is no harm on our side because you are happy. There's nothing to regret. And also we already told you that you can choose whether to remember that you plugged into the device as well. And also you can continuously improve the world that you live in, this universe. Have you seen the movie Matrix? So that is the type of thing that we're imagining. And also she talked about this is a drug, it's regrettable. But in this world, yes, if you are a drug addict, yes, your health will deteriorate, people will distance themselves from you, you will lose your job and you will become poor, you will be miserable. But that does not happen in our world. You can enjoy the full efficacy of the drug as much as you want for all of your life with no health results, right? So that is just great. I want that. Thirdly, there is an upper limit capped by what you experience. So you can only imagine the level of happiness that you have already experienced, but that is also fine because that's fine. You are able to experience the maximum happiness that your mind can possibly imagine. In this world, you see on Instagram, I see the Arabian oil rich people are leading the life that is better than mine. I see people that are smarter than me. I see people that are more beautiful than me. But in the thought machine, I am able to experience. I know that this is the limit of my happiness. I am not able to see something that is better than that. So I am perfectly happy. I cannot possibly think of anything better than that, right? And also, sorry. And the fourth thing you talked about, unpredictableness or effort, like disappointment is sometimes the spice of life. Yes, okay, we can also cater to that point, right? So for example, in the Kansai, if I feel that if I know in advance I'm going to win every round, I'm going to win the tournament, become champion, yes, that is a bit of not exciting. So I can kind of design the world to not have it that way. I can leave some level of competitiveness. Like if you have seen the Space Odyssey, the movie, you can determine like, okay, give me 10% of unpredictableness, but ensure me that none of my loved ones, like my parents, my friends, my family, are going to die in a traffic accident. That is how we can ensure that this is the type of world that I want to live in. There are some competitiveness, there are some thrills, there are some unpredictableness because that is what I love. But the the things that I do not love will never happen under a side. I love this motion. Yes.
Delta, of course, necessarily has to include the dissatisfaction with displeasure. Did you just join our opposition team?
I'm really okay. I think my government whip can sufficiently address that point. I'm sorry for not understanding your point. Okay, so I talked about all the points that have come out in LO. So let me extend my case a little bit more. So I talked about 2 layers of happiness. There is no minus. There is a lot of plus. I think under our side there is no minus because we can ensure that that is what the thought machine does literally. And let me ensure the prime minister already talked about being ugly, being not smart, being poor. There are some like unpredictable traffic accident or terrorism. You cannot predict what happens in your life. So that is the just like life of the average person in this world. Okay, but let's be preemptive. And even if none of those things are currently occurring to this person, you as an average person have nothing that is bad is happening. But still, let me talk about what undermines happiness this time. It is the anxiety, emotion of anxiety, right? So the mental well-being is severely damaged for all of the people. Significant people feel anxiety, depression on a daily basis. As an average person, you never know how or when these things might happen to you. For example, I do not know when my parents might die, when one of my friends might suddenly one day decide that they don't want to talk to me anymore, which is I'm very anxious about that, right? So even if that is not so severe, still, every day, the quality of life is being undermined by anxiety, possibility of anxiety, and that is what undermines the happiness, our ability to look for happiness, to get happiness, to grasp happiness, and fully experience happiness, not anymore. So, for example, from the second you are born, you are like when in childhood, you think about entrance exams to universities, you are next thinking about whether I can get a job, and even when I am working, I am already worrying about the client meeting that I have tomorrow, whether the client will be happy with my output, whether my boss will scold me for having a mediocre output, right? When I become a parent, I am worried about whether my kid is smart, whether my kid can go outside and come back to home in a safe way. When I am 40 or 50 years old, I am worrying about my deteriorating health because every person, average person, there are some health problems that you need to like experience, right? So what will I do after I get old? Who is going to look after my ill parents, right? All of these things never leave our minds. Many people worry about these things on a daily basis. That is why they have to work so hard. They have to save up the money and not spend it on what they want today. And also, I want to go to Dubai to do paragliding, but I don't want to die. So I refrain from that choice, right? There are things I want to buy, but instead, I want to save money to be in insurance, right? So all of these things, if I do not have to worry about all of these things, I can enjoy life to the fullest each and every day, right? So that is why just having the unpredictableness or anxiety itself is already undermining the quality of life of every single one of you in this room. So I advise everyone to plug into the thought device.
Uh, all the kinds of experiences and what brings happiness coming from the government side is completely confined to the world of the real world. They don't understand how a machine that directly can plug your brain and can give you pleasurable sensations and pleasurable expectations is like unlimited high-speed drug injection machine. It's unlimited. You can do as much as you want, and it moves at the speed of your synapses. That is the world they're trying to depict. And what does that result in? Everyone will use the machine so much that they will be numbed by the sensations that they do, and the limits of their imagination will eventually cap the amount of pleasure they can get, and thereby they'll be not able to experience any more pleasure. And that's, I hate to exaggerate in these kind of debates, but that'll literally lead most people to commit suicide because there is no other way of gaining pleasure anymore. I'm going to talk about two things in this debate. First, how people feel real world pleasure and why that it's more desirable than this like drug-induced hellscape of suicides that we're going to have with the plan. And secondly, I'm going to talk about how that like suicidal tendency will actually happen with their policy. So all rebuttals will be integrated into my argument. So let's first go on to how people experience happiness in the real world. My partner already talked about how you need to feel displeasure so that your pleasure, whatever that may be, it can be fulfilling and can lead to happiness. You cannot keep winning a debate, make it so easy that you don't give a damn, and keep getting the same level of happiness that, or the pleasure, whatever you want to call it, that you will get, because it becomes easy. It's the same thing as like playing a game that's too easy, right? Once you beat it, then you'll be completely numbed out by the sensation. So you need loss, you need anxiety, you need all those displeasurable things that are experienced by people to make sure that you can imagine that you can gain the pleasure when you win a debate round, or when you get the job all you want, or when you get the consulting job that you wanted. Like all those things are dependent upon experience of displeasure in real life. No. We believe that when they talk about the average people in the society, obviously not everyone can be fulfilled, happy, fulfill their dreams all the time and every time. We accept that. But at least they can feel happiness, right? Like by working hard, they're capable of understanding, I hate this word, but the delta of like being displeasured and being happy. Like that experience is only possible if you can experience displeasure and thereby experience happiness. Like that, and they have not answered how they can possibly keep experiencing happiness with an easy game, debates, and winning all the time, that like what we do all the time now. So that brings me nicely into their paradigm. What happens in their model? First, we have to they're going to come up and eat out their way out of it by saying, oh, we can incorporate unpredictability. We can incorporate a little bit of unhappiness. We can incorporate different kinds of aspects to make sure that it can keep feeling the happiness. No, that they can't. Why is that? Because we have to think about the kind of people that are going to plug themselves into these things, right? They say average, but like the times when you feel most desperate, like when you break up with your loved ones, you lose a family member, when you lose your job you love, that's when you want to most usually commit suicide or like do terrible, terrible things that are extremely dangerous. But if these people are so desperate, then they will choose this position. And they can't deny this because they can't just suddenly say, oh, you're not allowed to feel displeasure or broken hearts. They have to accept these people. When they do, they will repeat the kind of pleasurable sensations because they are at such a loss. They're at a very vulnerable state. They will, at the speed of the synapses, repeat the pleasurable sensation in their mind over and over and over and over again. But as they do more of it, they'll become more numb to that sensation. And then because they'll keep doing this at the speed of light, like 100 times over, like before even people can blink, like that pleasurable limit will be reached in nanoseconds. And when that happens, what does that create? First, they can no longer feel happiness at all because they can't imagine anything else beyond that point, right? So they become completely incapable of having the kind of pleasurable sensations they used to have. That same thing happens to drug addicts. When their upper limit of the drugs becomes so much that they cannot experience any more pleasure and they commit suicide or will hurt themselves or other people. But you disagree.
Okay, Hiramoto-kun likes roller coaster and strong stimulus of happiness it brings for him, but after riding Fujikyu for 10 times, he does not go dumb and despair about life. He just goes back to moderately happy life where he can work at a Hawaii Tokyo.
again, you're forgetting they can do these experiences at the speed of light. The real life limits your ability to gain that level of happiness because you can't do that physically, right? Time, it consumes effort, you need money. The reality allows you to experience these problems. But like if you allow these people to keep experience pleasure, then they'll eventually become numb. And then when they realize they cannot experience any more pleasure anymore, that's when you become suicidal. That's when you become extremely despondent. And then they said, oh, we can build randomness and into the system. No, because if you have done so much pleasure, just pleasure, so such a long time, even a tiny amount of randomness that brings displeasure to you, even the small amount of unhappiness will completely break you down. A lot of dictators, right, when they're even criticized a little bit, they have a complete mental breakdown because they've never been criticized even in their life. If they experience this kind of things, or like 100 times the speed of light, and then to suddenly experience like disappointment, even a little bit, will completely crush them. And then they said, we can bring in new worlds into the situation, so that's fine, like unpredictability. But like unpredictable situation, you don't know how these people will experience it. They might not like it, right? So that there's no guarantee that these people can keep feeling the same kind of pleasurable sensations that they want to give. So we believe that these people who are like incapable of like imagining situations that are much more happier will reach the upper limit where their drugs will run out and they will not be able to face reality anymore. We believe at the very least, you have the ability to face happiness in the real world, no matter how hard that may be. We'll rather have that in a drug-induced haze that will eventually make you suicidal. We oppose.
あ、聞こえますか？はい、始めます。So, we to some extent concede that you may be able to lead a reasonably happy life even in the real world. We also to some extent concede that the kind of happiness that individual can experience in this new universe may not be as perfect as you initially anticipated. But still, even if they can prove that, they cannot win this debate because they never sufficiently engage with our logic. Like you can at least avoid the very negative experience in this alternative universe, like death of your family or your friends, harassment from your boss in the corporations, or you may be suddenly being laid off by corporations someday. We think on this side of the house that just being able to escape from those like very uncontrollable and negative experience itself is already much more desirable than their paradigm. And even if our world is not as perfect as we thought. So what they have to prove on their side of the house is why complete uncontrollability is essential for human beings to become happy. And that's the burden that we would like to impose on that side of the house. Two very simple clash in my speech. First of all, can individual lead happy life in this experience machine? Second of all, can individual lead happy life in the real world? So first of all, can individuals lead happy life in the experience machine? So the crucial failure coming from the other side of the house is that they have never engaged with like our model presented by our prime minister. They have told us that step-by-step approach is impossible under their side of the house. We already preempted this in our model. Like we told you that this like alternative universe is something that is customizable by your own will. So for example, if you are bored of non-existence of dinosaur debater in the debating community, you can welcome us even on your side of the house, even on our side of the house. But the unique beauty of this universe is that you can create the most suitable and nuanced step-by-step approach. For example, you can do like this. I want to exclude Toshi-san from debating community because Toshi-san is too strong. But I'm okay with welcoming Ora Kansai-san Iguda because there's reasonable chance for me to win against these debaters. Or you can exclude at least Iraja from debating tournament, or the people who you have conflict with. Like this is how you can create more healthy. You can more healthily enjoy the step-by-step approach, and this is far better achieved on the side of the house. So what they have to prove on their side of the house is again why complete uncontrollability is essential for individuals to enjoy the step-by-step approach or delta. So another thing coming from Toshi-san was that this is tantamount to suicide, addiction, taking drugs such as MDMA. But note that this is just rhetoric and there was no logic behind that. Like the clear qualitative difference between these two examples is simply whether you can become happy through taking that choice. Like when it comes to MDMA, like if you become addicted, you obviously become unhappy. But on the other side of the house, by the definition, like you can become happy. That's a clear difference between two sides of the house. Like don't be
POI.
deceived by their rhetoric. Yes.
You can change the framework of the model, but you can't change the brain's chemistry. Like people get addicted to many things and become numb to it all the time. How do you like completely like dodge the mechanics of human brain and avoid addiction or avoid the kind of dependence?
We don't say that we can completely change the brain structure or something. Like, what we just say is that we can create the most suitable and customizable universe, and this is the simple model coming from our side of the house. Another thing we heard from the other side of the house is that coming from leader of the opposition, they have told us that the scope of the experience that you can have in this experience machine is limited by your ability of imagination. Yes, we to some extent concede that, for example, you cannot opt into the choice that you know nothing about on outside of the house. For example, you may not choose to enjoy bungee jump or debater may not choose to enjoy bungee jump or paraglider because you have never experienced them. But still, for example, if debater is tired of debating in this experience machine, debaters can may know about Mogi Kokren, for example, and they can choose to go to Mogi Kokren or ESS speech section, and at least you can try something new, even continuously try something new, even on the side of the house, and that's completely okay. Marginal utility doesn't decline so much even on the side of the house. No, thank you. Last of all, leader of the opposition also told us that pleasure is just the chemical reaction, and this is something that is superficial. Okay, what's the problem with that? As Mina-chan already told you, that applied to any form of happiness in the very first place. Now, I'm very happy and excited to debate with Kondu and Mina-chan, but at the end of the day, that happiness or excitement is just the result of adrenaline or serotonin, I don't know, but chemical reaction doesn't mean that it's completely meaningless. If you can happy, that's sufficient reason for us to take this debate. So, okay, moving on to the next point, whether individuals can lead a happy life in the real world. So, what we have been telling you from our side of the house is that many unpredictable and uncontrollable factors negatively affect your QOL, such as intelligence, appearance, talent, or the social circumstances, or pressure from surrounding people. The response coming from their side of the house is, but up and down is exciting. Losing in debating tournament is also precious experience. This is true only when that consequence is caused by something that you can control or you can be responsible for. What if you lose debate because of iraja? Or what if you are discriminated because of gender or race or your nationality in the tournament? Like for such kind of people, we think that losing in the debating tournament is very negative experience. And at least on our side of the house, we can avoid such kind of a negative experience. And that's the concrete benefit that we can surely achieve on our side of the house. For these reasons, we beg to propose.
Thank you. The missing most important factor from entire government side is you. Not the you illustrated as government side, but real you. I know most of you perhaps lost. Most of you perhaps it's sad or lonely, of course dissatisfactory. But we say we are living in a world of duality, right? Fact that you're sad and you hope for the, making the effort and win in the future, that's a worthy of the civilization. And that's what, our, partner has told you about the delta of that. That's why we respect you. And we think, we stated clearly that you are worthy than government side has been illustrated. And that's why we won by you. I want to talk about two issues in my speech. Firstly, the satisfaction and worthy of the civilized being. And secondly, I want to talk about all of the things that, government side has been engaged. So moving on to the first one. They said like, okay, so they just, switched the definition one by one, right? Because, motion states that, this is necessary about the pleasure or, satisfaction and that kind of stuff. But, they said like, suddenly, we say delta and they can create a delta. No, perhaps, right? Because my partner clearly told you, the fact that you've been sad or dissatisfactory is necessarily for you to feel happiness by engaging the process of the feeling of making efforts and that kind of stuff. If they are saying they want to impose it, they have to come to our side, right? So they are already showing joining our side, right? And also we say actually it's kind of impossible because they talk about the chemical reaction or neural reaction, but they don't understand the actual brain scientific study, right? Fact is that not the chemical reaction single that exists. But chemical reaction is just exists reactor and things that neuron that feels the happiness itself. So what is needed there is a circuit to feel this chemical compounds in the first place. My partner clearly told you chemical compounds or new circuit is built by an external factor called experience. And Toshi already clearly told you those building of the circuit necessarily has to be dissatisfactory or sad. Because the fact that you're staying there, probably feeling sadness or maybe losing is a very bad thing. But that is creating your new actually circuit to feel for the future happiness. And they never engaged that point. Yes, I can take point of information, please.
So, okay, our satisfaction may not be perfect, but please be comparative. How is it worse the everyday labor, very tough labor, harassment, death of your family?
Because there's no guarantee that why you can't opt out from the harassment. If you think that harassment, yes, of course, in the real life there's a harassment, sadness, and that can necessarily, they never show why that continues forever, right? They just decide you, every single one of you is not like them, right? So they, them can, go into the grand final, but every single one of you can never go to the grand final. No, right? Some of you may go to there, right? Some of you may not. But we told you that, fact that firstly, some of you may go there is in the first place worthy. And secondly, even though you can't go, but this hope and also, you making effort itself is more pleasurable. And that's what we told you, that's delta, right? Maybe you just break in the next tournament, but that is great because as my partner told you, this is a step of actually you growing up. In their paradigm, you can just go to the grand final and that's it. But maybe most of you cannot be in a champion in the future. But it's great, right? Because you engage in activity for the hope. That's why we say we won this round. Then Hamada Miya-san said several things as well on the second issue. There's a possibility of the anxiety. Unfortunately, possibility of anxiety exists, but that's a duality, right? Also possible to anxiety is transcribed as a hope, right? So actually in a deputy's example, they said like they worry about having non-smart children. Problem is, why having non-smart children is bad? Maybe now you think having no smart children is bad, but actually you have in the future. Maybe on the first time you feel sadness, But eventually, you try to think what is the other factor to evaluate it, all right? The virtue of, things that's, that's not only about the smartness. How about the kindness, right? How about sports activity? How about the art activity? There's a variety of things you can feel happiness at, or, human civilization can worthy to evaluate it. Or just, you being there, smiling at, any kind of the response of your joke itself can make happiness. Anything can be happiness unless you have dissatisfaction or worry or that kind of stuff in there. And that fact that you're being worried about is a symbol that you are you. No. Then they said like how was people diseased, all right? I mean people die in the future. I unfortunately yes everybody dies, right? But fact that everybody dies is actually also virtue, right? That's why, because it's limited, that's why you feel worthy, right? If it's infinite kind of a universe, and infinite kind of reactions, and infinite kind of, I don't know, sexiness or hotness or smartness, then, you cannot actually feel the, a limit. As Toshi told you, they never engaged on that point, all right? Because, there is a limitation in the real world, there's a uniqueness of, real world. That's why you can feel, worthy and you can actually, preciously respect each moment. That's why we won on the, every single thing. So members of the House, we won this round because we were once you, and we maybe are you, and maybe we will be you. But we say this is just more happiness. That's why we've been never prouder to oppose this motion. Thank you.
If all debates are determined by how we make a difference between government side and opposition side, we think we are clearly making a difference because we define properly what actually constitutes happiness and pleasure. We defined how people experience them. And the government side initially said, let's not experience any displeasure. Let's just feel good and end with that. And then when we said that's not possible, they said, oh, we're just going to sprinkle a little bit of unpredictability. We're going to add a little bit of bad to this situation so that you can feel happy. The fact that they admitted that that's necessary concedes that our definition is superior to theirs, and the fact that they cannot achieve that kind of perfect balance, then that's a problem. And if they want that perfect balance, well, basically that's a real world, ladies and gentlemen, so we don't need this machine. Two things I'm going to talk about in this debate, first about happiness based on unhappiness, and second about happiness based on happiness, what the government side has proposed. First about happiness based on unhappiness. We told you that the difference between what you feel, displeasure, anxiety, whatever that may be, is necessary to feel that pleasure in your pleasure centers of your brain. You need that to make sure that you have hopes and dreams that are necessary. Also, we talked about how unpredictability is required to make sure that you can gain happiness that are beyond the control of your imagination. And that's crucial for you to keep living and keep aspiring. Even if these people, and by the way, this definition says average people, right? So we're not talking about like the most like desperate people that have like no prospect of hope and dreams whatsoever. But average people that has the ability to feel both the hopes and dreams and have pleasure. So we believe that they have a chance, right? They all have the chance to feel some degree of happiness in the status quo, and therefore we think that's desirable because the alternative is your inability to feel happiness or pleasure because you're numbed out by the sensation of what this machine creates. So that brings me nicely into my second point. Happiness based on happiness is no happiness at all because you can't feel it anymore. Drugs, people that take drugs or people that do exciting sports can never be satisfied by doing the same things over and over again because that numbs out their pleasure centers of their brain and they no longer feel the same level of adrenaline or same level of the chemicals in their brain. So they're forced to do more and more exciting things, more and more pleasurable things, to the point where in their paradigm, they're capped at the limit of how much they can imagine what's pleasurable and what's not. And then on the other hand, they said, oh, but like we can bring randomness to it. We can bring in like, a little bit of displeasure so we can solve the problem. Well, how do you design a system that can accurately measure like the exact amount of happiness and the exact amount of unhappiness like that can happen, right? That's not possible because no one can understand the brain. No one understands your expectations. No one can understand, not even you understands what's good and what's unpredictable. So designing a perfect machine that can only give you like the delta pleasure, I hate this word, it's impossible, right? The only place you can do that is in the real world because that's where randomness comes in and that's where things become happy. And we told you the eventual end result, natural end result, is suicidal thoughts because all drug addicts all end up in the same area. The fact that they can no longer feel pleasure makes them crazy because they can't even remember anymore when they can experience it. And if you incorporate even a little bit of happiness to compensate, they will freak out and will never be able to recover, just like people that are on drugs. So we believe that, yes, the real world is tough, but that's why it's worth living. We beg to oppose.
In this debate, both teams reached the consensus that being happy is something good, and we want to achieve that. Given that, crucial failure of opposition bench is that they didn't explain how people can be happy surely on the other side of the house. They said some unique happiness exists exclusive for physical world. We disagree with that analysis, but let's take that case at their best. Even if some unique, some mysterious benefit exists on the exclusive for the physical world, they didn't show us. The analysis allow us to be confident that generally or definitely average people in this debate can achieve that. And we think that as we consistently talk to you, that multiple uncontrollable factor confine your happiness. Where you born, appearances you have, social situation surrounding you. Conclusion drawn from this analysis is that even if some unique happiness exists on the other side of the house, but many people fail to achieve that on the other side of the house, right? Because we said, as we said, this uncontrollability confine that kind of thing. So I think that if people cannot reach to that happiness, that unique happiness is nonsensical. That Takizawa Seisan said that the government whip said, opposition whip said that anything can be happy in their world, but we say everything is happiness as default on our society. So let's examine the debate by two key points. Firstly, the comparison with our happiness, quality of happiness, but secondly, a meta-analysis from the opposition bench. So firstly, of happiness. From the Prime Minister's speech, I already said happiness the entity of happiness is the electric signal and chemical things, and a physical incident is not necessary thing. Okay, that's why we think that if we feel the happiness on the outside of the house, there is no intrinsic difference as to the quality of happiness. We don't see any delta in the first places. They try to contend this point by saying, well, step by step it is necessary, or without failure we cannot feel the happiness. I don't think so. But even if so, easy. We will create the world which has, for example, Toshi-san or Hide-san is very strong debater. Maybe we will lose the Hide-san or Toshi-san for some times, but I can overcome that kind of strong debater like in this round, right? Okay. But the problem is that they didn't provide any analysis that step by step or this kind of unique happiness is accessible for average people. Look, there is no QU debater except me in this room because geographical condition confine their freedomness. It takes a very tons of cost and time to come to Kansai, right? That kind of step by step is inaccessible for QU debater, for example, right? Also, they said like that kind of happiness on outside of the house is restricted or limited by the capacity to imagine. Yes, accepted, but like. We think that be comparative. The restriction based on the imagine is far better than the restriction of the physical rule. For example, in this society, I cannot fly, but in our world, I can fly as I want. Like that's the scale is far better considering that, right? So move on to the second point. That's why we think outside the happiness possibility, quality of happiness is the same, and the possibility to be achieved is far better for outside of the house. But secondly, meta-analysis. What they said is like this technology is appearing as so dangerous, right? Okay, that's the evidence that this technology is so great, right? We think that the fact something's appealing is not a reason to ban in the first place. I think they had to elaborate it more in this debate. But secondly, they said chemical makes us commit suicide. I'm sorry, I majored the literature in my university, so I'm not sure whether what they have said is true. But even if that is true and the people committed suicide, we are happy to accept that because on our side of the house, we believe living in happy life for 20 years is far better than living in the unhappy life for 80 years. That's the conclusion. Even if some people commit suicide by indulging in this technology, by feeling the infinite amount of happiness, that's totally far better than living the very constrained life for 80 years. Ladies and gentlemen, many friends often ridicule us by saying you are semi-fi geni. But today, we are happy to take championship by skipping the graphite geni phase because proposition side don't see any value on step by step. We are very happy to propose.